Welcome to the Living a Nordic Life podcast, where we explore a simpler, cosier and more intentional life the Nordic way. I'm Fiona McKenna, your Nordic living guide and founder of Living a Nordic Life, where I share all things Nordic living and show you that a Nordic life is the way to bring intentional calm and healthy habits into your own life, wherever you are in the world. Are you looking for ways to bring simplicity, coziness and calm into your life? Well, let me show you how. Visit the Living a Nordic Life website to explore how I can help you on your journey to simple, healthy and happy calm, the Nordic way. You can subscribe to the podcast right here. And if you want regular inspirational emails sent with love from Norway and straight to your inbox, don't forget to subscribe to the Living a Nordic Life newsletters. And so now let's dive into our episode. Hello. Today I want to talk to you about something called the primstav. You may or may not have heard about it. And if you've read my blog over the last few years, then you will have heard about it because I had an entire year of writing about the primstav. A few years ago, my sister-in-law Benta and her husband Ulla gave me a beautiful book for Christmas. It's called Hverdagskost of Festmat Lang Primstaven. And it's all about something called the primstav and the food traditions around it. Celebration food as well. That's what Festmat means. At the time, I knew nothing about the primstav. And it sparked a curiosity and a thirst to find out more about it. The book was a perfectly timed gift because I had just decided literally a couple of days before that I was going to start a blog and a website and a Facebook group called Living a Nordic Life. And I'd not actually published anything at that point, although I knew that's what I wanted to do and I wasn't quite sure where to start. And this seemed like the ideal way to put some structure into what I was writing. To write about the primstav and the food traditions around it. But what is a primstav? If you've never heard of it, I'm going to explain a little bit about what they are. It's a perpetual calendar, but it's also a physical, tangible thing that you can hold. Most primstavs are long pieces of wood, about 1/2 metre long and about 2 inches wide and about 1/2 inch thick. Around about that. I mean, there's no kind of, set size for them. Some of them are circular as well. A circular piece of wood with a hole in the middle. But the long ones look a little bit like a rudimentary play sword, but without the hilt. On one side, there's a line, or actually on both sides, there's a line along the full length, with notches and marks to denote days. Above each of these marks is a symbol. It could be a bear, a broom, a cross, an axe. All very Nordic and very naive in nature. One side is for the summer months and the other side is for the winter months. And primstavs are nothing fancy or elaborate. You get slightly more fancy and elaborate ones, but it's very much a rustic, everyday, useful piece of kit. They were just a way for people to keep track of the days of the year. You don't really see old primstavs around anymore, and believe me, I've been looking. I've been looking now for probably about 4 years for a really old one, and I've not found anything here. I look everywhere all the time. You can find replicas, but nothing old and original. So they're a bit of a rarity. And often you only see them in museums, and not really that often in museums. There is one in the museum in Tønsberg, which is by the castle in Tønsberg. If you ever go there, Tønsberg is Norway's oldest town. So it's something that you would find in there. But otherwise, in all the museums that we've been into, and we go into a lot of museums, I have never seen another one. But I guess you might find one or two in an old barn somewhere, perhaps. But they stopped being used in the 1700s, on a very specific day, actually, or a very specific day that was significant to the downfall of the poor primstav. It was Sunday the 18th of February, 1700. Sunday the 18th of February 1700. And that was when Norway adopted the Gregorian calendar. Before that it had been the Julian calendar. And the primstav had been the only way to keep track of the days from about the 1500s. Once the Gregorian calendar, that's the one that we use today, came into popular use, the primstavs became pretty much useless. People would have just discarded them. They were probably burnt for firewood or thrown in a corner of a barn with a bunch of other things that might come in useful at some point. We've all got that, haven't we? Not necessarily in a barn, but perhaps a drawer somewhere. In modern times, that's what would have happened with the primstavs, isn't it? They would have just put it in that drawer of things that might come in useful. That drawer in the kitchen that you really need to clean out. We've all got one of them. What they didn't know at the time was that they would never truly leave Norwegian culture. And the days and the symbols that were so significant then are still in play today. It's hard with these pieces of cultural history, isn't it, to erase them. They are just, if you erase the thing itself, it doesn't matter. The idea of them is so deeply entrenched into a nation's soul, literally, that they're never going to go away. So, let me tell you a little bit about the primstavs themselves. Imagine the stick with the line along it and these markings for the days. And each of those is an important day of the year. It's not every day that's marked. It's important, significant days of the year. They are almost all, not all of them, but almost all are Christian days. But as we know, lots of Christian holidays are simply pagan feast days that were adopted by the church. I'm sorry to say that, but it is true. And because of this, it was easy for people in Norway to use the primstavs. There was still a really close connection to the old gods and traditional ways of doing things. And so changing to Christian holy days was not such a big thing. It was just a day that had a different name and perhaps had a saint assigned to it. But going off on a tangent a little bit, not completely off on a tangent, but just a tiny bit, I'm going to tell you a side story here. I want to tell you about how important the old ways were. When Christianity first came to Norway, in fact Scandinavia generally, it wasn't in some huge sweeping way. The Vatican couldn't really be bothered with Scandinavia much. As far as it was concerned, Scandinavia was this sparsely populated frozen wasteland that was so far from Rome that it was just not worth any trouble. Bit of, we might send somebody up there, but we're not going to do this huge kind of, big campaign to kind of turn everybody into Christian. So, yeah, they couldn't be bothered with it. Nobody really wanted to trek all the way from Europe, all the way through Europe from Rome to keep an eye on the Scandinavians. They'd probably just get on with it themselves. And so they were pretty much left to their own devices. A case in point is the Stave Church at the Museum of Cultural History in Oslo. If you go on holiday or if you are, around in Oslo, you really should go there. It's fascinating. It's nice to go in the summer, I have to say. It's an open-air museum in a kind of parkland, and it's collections of buildings from all over Norway. And what they have cleverly done is put them into different regions. So you can walk through all these different regions with all of these buildings that are particular and typical of those areas in Norway. At some point they've been dismantled and then brought and reassembled in the museum park, and they show life from all these different areas. Anyway, one of them, which is probably the kind of star of the show actually there, because it's kind of in the middle of the parkland, is a stave church from Goll in Hallingdal, and it's a particularly nice stave church. But if you know Hallingdal, it's in southern Norway, and it's Buskerud, which is a kind of quite a remote place. Even now, it's very much a holiday area for people, for tourists, and skiing, of course, in the winter because it gets quite cold and it gets very snowy there. But it's not really that accessible. We have roads and we have trains and whatever. But if you can imagine 800 years ago, it would have been extremely remote. That was when the church was built, 800 years ago. It would have been extremely remote. And the people who built it were from the area, but they built it in typical stave church fashion. But at some point during the building of it, when they got to the inside, they decided that they were going to appease the old gods, just in case. At the top of all the pillars in the nave, you'll find the Norse gods carved. You'll find Odin, Thor, Freya, and lots of others. They clearly thought that, yes, we'll build this Christian church, but we don't want to upset the old gods, so we'll put them in as well. And it gives you an idea of how people saw the old ways and the new ways. They wanted to adopt the new ways, but they were a little bit worried that they might upset the old gods. What happens if they were still real? And to have a calendar that combined both was logical. It was easy to just change the names. So anyway, back to the primstav. All along the primstav stick are markings for the most significant, important days of the year. Each day is marked with a symbol, and the symbols all have some significance to the day itself. Of course, not everybody could read or write. In fact, probably not very many people could read or write. So a symbol was the logical thing to put on there because you instantly had an idea of what the day was about. Not all days are feast days or holy days. Some days are important for things like harvesting or the making of Christmas beer. Yes, I kid you not, there is actually a day for that. So if you haven't made your Christmas beer yet, you're too late, I'm sorry. But let me tell you a few of my favourites, and some that you're probably already familiar with, actually. Let's start with the ones that you know, or one that you know. I'm not going to go through every one, I'm sorry. Maybe I'll do another podcast and I'll do some more days on the primstav. That would be fun, wouldn't it? But one that I know that you know, and as we are coming up to December, you're probably going to be thinking about this anyway. It's Lucia-dagen, or St. Lucia's Day. This is a day and a night that are both Christian and pagan. Actually, it started as a pagan festival. The pagan legend tells of evil spirits roaming the land through the night, and the human world having to light the way to keep them away. And if you know anything about Lucia-dagen, if you don't know anything about it, it's a day when children dress in completely white, it's almost like a dress, down to the ground with long sleeves, and one is appointed to walk at the front of a procession, and he or she wears a crown made out of leaves and fronds with 4 candles on it, and they're lighting the way, and the children walk in a procession. They sing a special song, and they carry something, which I'm going to tell you about in a minute, a food that is related to this day. But on the primstav it's marked with a sword, keep away things, fire, or a light. I think I like this one the most because it symbolises that link between Christianity and pagan worlds and the combination of both on the primstav. But what about the food? We all know the special food we eat on Lucia-dagen. It's the lucenat, and that is a saffron cake. It's a dough-based cake, slightly sweet, and it's made into the shape of an S, usually, although you can make it into lots of other shapes, and it's decorated with raisins. Currants, actually, I think, but it's difficult to get currants here, so I use raisins, I have to say. Another day that is significant on the primstav is the 14th of April, and that is sommerdag. It's the time when we turn the primstav from the winter side. Remember, it's got 2 sides. It's got a winter side and a summer side. We turn it from the winter side over onto the summer side. It's sometimes called flytedag, or moving day, and it was a day in southern Norway especially, when people in service, like maids or farmhands, would move. They'd move from one employer to another. It's marked on the primstav with a tree or a sprouting twig. It's a great symbol to remind us that spring is on its way. Excuse me, I'm just going to have a little drink of tea because we are still in the middle of cold and coughing season here in Norway, and my youngest is in grade 1. So as you can imagine, she's bringing home all of the bugs and viruses. So I'm still a little bit hoarse. I think I said that in the last podcast. It's going on for a while. Back to the primstav. Another favourite of mine is the 12th of January, or Midwinter's Day. It's a day that is exactly halfway between the first winter day and the first summer day. And it has absolutely no connection, zero connection to the church calendar at all. But it does go way back to saga times. It would have been an evening of celebration and offerings to Odin and Thor. Naturally, the symbol on the primstav is a snowflake because we're halfway through the winter. Other days tell of the best time to make Christmas beer, when to clear away the Christmas decorations, or when is the best time to plant wheat. It's hundreds and even thousands of years of knowledge, passed down through generations, on one simple rustic piece of wood. Crazy, isn't it? And many of the days that we still acknowledge and follow without thinking too much about their symbolism on the primstav. If you think about anything that you celebrate that is Norwegian, such as St. Hans, Midsummer, Easter, that's not Norwegian necessarily, but it's marked on the primstav, Christmas, of course, New Year's Day, all of these things are marked, all of these days, these special days, are marked on the primstav, and some that are a little bit more obscure that you would not have heard of. But you might actually recognise their symbolism, and you might recognise the food that you eat on those particular days. So as you can see, it's really easy to get drawn into the symbolism and the importance of the primstav. It's a bit of a rabbit hole, if I'm honest. It's a rabbit hole that I've been down for about 4 years now. So be careful if you start going down there. But if you want to find out more, I'm going to put a link at the bottom of this that you can click on, and it's to the primstav section of my website, and you can look at the days that I followed starting from January. I didn't do every single one, I have to say. I did the ones that I thought were the most interesting to my readers, and I linked them to particular food traditions on those days. Some of them are food traditions that we most definitely do eat on that day for whatever reason or another. And some of them are food traditions that are linked tentatively one way or another. Also, I'm going to put a link to the Norwegian lexicon, which is a brilliant website. Anything that you want to find out is on there, particularly Norwegian and Nordic stuff. It's really cool. It's in Norwegian. I don't know if there is the possibility to translate it on its site into English, but you can always do that on Google Translate, can't you? And I'm going to put a link there to the primstav. And they have every single primstav day listed there with the traditions, both old and new, and anything else that links to it. I don't think there's any food traditions associated with that, but if you wanted to really investigate it, you could always search a little bit further. Or you can take a look at this book that I bought that I was telling you about. And it's written by Børge Sivertsen and Arne Brimmy. Arne Brimmy is a well-known Norwegian chef. I think at some point he must have had a restaurant and a hotel in Oslo, but now he has a farm with a hotel and a restaurant in sort of south central Norway. It's a little bit remote actually, but he is very much into very traditional Norwegian food, and some that is quite rustic and perhaps something that you wouldn't find very often. He's a very interesting chef to read about. I've never watched him on TV, but I've certainly got a lot of his books, and he's very interesting. So that might be worth having a look at that book. And I hope you've enjoyed listening to this and maybe enjoy your foray into finding out more about the primstav. And I will see you in the next episode. Bye! If you've enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to the Living a Nordic Life newsletters so you can get an email when I release a new episode. It's a quick and easy way to keep up with all things Nordic living. Please visit livinganordiclife.com. You can listen to Living a Nordic Life on lots of podcast apps, including Spotify, Apple Podcast, Google Podcasts, and plenty of others. If you've enjoyed the Living a Nordic Life podcast, why not leave me a rating? So that's the end of Living a Nordic Life for today, and I look forward to seeing you next time.